After this break, I'll be introducing my guest to you, and our conversation will be underway. Don't go away. You're welcome back. This is our special coverage on COVID-19. My guest in the studio, Salom Adonu, is our head of features and articles, Citi FM and Citi TV, and Ebenezer Afenyidazi is head of our business desk. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Right, quickly, Eben, take us through the global figures.
Yeah, so currently the global figure stands at 5,434,617. The deaths stand at 344,504, and that's 13% of the cases. Recovered cases stand at 2,273,150, which is 87% of the total cases. Okay. And the active cases, that's currently infected patients globally, is 2,816,963, and those in mild condition, which stands at 2,763,741. That is 98% of the cases, and those in serious or critical condition stand at 53,222. And the territories are nearing over 215 countries and territories all have cases now. And USA still leads the charts. There's a bit of a challenge with the figures here. I'm not getting it clearly, but USA leads, Brazil follows, Russia, Spain, UK, Italy, France, Germany, Turkey, Iran, India, Peru, Canada, and China. These are the top 14 countries still leading the figures. I'll get the individual country figures later on. Now let's also look at Africa. Africa, the case count, according to the Africa Centers for Disease Prevention and Control, stands at 107,412. That's for the whole continent of 1.3 billion people. The deaths, 3,246 cases. Deaths, the whole of Africa. The recoveries, 42,626 for the continent. And also they have the breakdown of the regional blocks. North Africa still leads. They have recorded over 33,400 cases. The numbers are rounded up. So West Africa, over 28,300 cases. Southern Africa, over 22,900 cases. Eastern Africa, over 11,600 cases. And Central Africa has over 11,200 cases. Now let's look at a few of the countries by the African numbers. South Africa still leads with 21,343 cases. Their deaths stand at 407. Their recoveries, 10,104, which is quite high. That is almost half of the cases they have. And they've conducted a test of 564,370, and this for a population of almost 60 million. Algeria also comes in with 8,113 cases. The deaths, 592. Their recoveries, 4,426. And the test conducted so far in Algeria is still quite low, 6,500. And this is for a population of over 43 million. That's a bit strange. Morocco has 7,429 cases. The deaths, 198. Recoveries, 4,686. And they've conducted 133,561 tests. This is for a population of almost 36 million. Tunisia has 1,048 cases. They have the lowest within the Northern Africa region. And their deaths, 48. Their recoveries, 914. And they've conducted a test of 47,649. And this is for a population of 11 million. Egypt has 16,000 cases, 513. The deaths, 735. Recoveries, 4,628. And for a very long time, Egypt's test, according to the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, stands at 90,000. I do not know why. I don't know whether they have stopped testing. And this is for a population of almost 90 million. Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa, their cases, 2,366. The deaths, 30. Recoveries, 1,100. 108, and they've conducted a test of 18,303, and this for a population of almost 25 million. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, has 7,502 cases, which is still quite low, and there are issues about whether indeed they are testing enough. And the deaths is 221, recoveries 2,174, and their tests per their population 43,328, and that's quite low for a population of a little over 200 million. You know, it's a bit surprising. Burkina Faso, 832 cases, 52 deaths, recovery 683, and their test is 3,349. Ethiopia also, if you like, the second largest population within Africa, because they have over 114 million people, and they have a test of just 81,000, and their cases is just 502, which is quite surprising, and deaths 5 and 152. Senegal, 3,047 cases, their deaths 34, recoveries 1,456, and they've tested just 29,220 people. Quickly, let me jump to Madagascar, because of course their interest. Their cases stand at 527. Their deaths 2, and their recoveries 142, and their test is 5,824, which is still quite low because this is a population of almost 27 million people. Now, before Salam comes in, let me run you through a few of the African headlines, stories making headlines. So, IRC warns of undetected virus outbreaks in Africa. Now, African countries are at risk of having undetected coronavirus outbreaks due to low testing rates. And this is according to the International Rescue Committee. Nigeria, Chad, and Mali are listed as having the lowest rate of coronavirus testing in the continent. And obviously, like as I said earlier, and Nigeria, for a population of 200 million, to have tested just around 43,000. So the IRC is definitely worried that the low testing could be a problem. So they are calling for international support for countries that are struggling with the testing capacity, so that we boost it. In Malawi, football fans are pushing for the league to resume. Football fans in Malawi have demanded that the local league, halted as one of the measures to contain COVID, should resume. Led by supporters of the country's two most followed clubs, Yansa Big Bullets and BE Forward Wanderers, they petitioned the Football Association of Malawi, saying they saw no reason why football could not return while political rallies, which attract huge numbers of people, were being held by politicians ahead of the June presidential runoff. So that's the interesting story coming from Malawi. And they have another interesting story, also because of their election coming up. After the first election was cancelled, the electoral commissioner has actually resigned, and so they have some interesting issues in Malawi. Coronavirus, Tanzania working alone. Tanzania is still living in a bit of disbelief and doing their own thing. And for almost 1 month now, they have not released any data on coronavirus figures as to how they are managing their cases. And an official says, well, it's ended, so people should feel free. So they are working in their own beliefs and convictions. And so those are the issues, some of the issues coming from Africa.
Right, thank you very much, Aben. Salom, so here in Ghana, we have Savannah region that have recorded coronavirus cases. What are our figures like?
Well, thanks, Firma. So Ghana has recorded some new figures. In terms of confirmed cases, we've recorded 66 more, bringing our tally to 6,683. Unfortunately, one more person has died, and that one person brings the total number of deaths to 32. And we are told that she is a 66-year-old person or woman who was a known hypertensive and died a day after admission with respiratory symptoms. So this clearly shows that that person has had a pre-existing condition, the comorbidities we talk about, and the fact that she also reported late for treatment. I don't know whether they didn't take notice of the fact that the symptoms she manifested could be coronavirus related. So she got to the hospital and died just a day after with respiratory symptoms. That's so sad. So our death toll is now 32, and Ghana actually records or has one of the lowest death rates on the continent, given the number of cases we have recorded. So this is how it looks like now. A lot of the action we are seeing are from the general surveillance group. So that this person who died came from the general surveillance group.
Yeah.
So the general surveillance numbers, as we have them now, we have 2,233 cases, enhanced contact tracing, 4,335, and then the quarantine cases in Tamale and Accra, if you recall, the 1,030 people who traveled and came back and were quarantined at the airport, and the 10 Guineans who were held in Tamale. That brought the number to 150 in terms of the confirmed cases or positive cases recorded in those populations. So a total of 6,683. And we have also had a few recoveries. Our recoveries have shot up by 20. So yesterday we were at 1,978, which was 1978.
Yeah.
Today we are at 1998. So 1,998. So 20 more people have recovered. So out of the 66 new cases, this is how the spread looks like. Greater Accra has 18 of those. Eastern region 0, Central region 2, and so the 18 in Greater Accra, 10 of them are in Shai Osudoku. Accra Metro recorded 3, Lejokuku recorded 3, Ladade Kotopong 2. Central region, the 2 are from the Fansiman area or district, or I don't know if it's a municipality now. Western region, 2 more cases recorded in the secondary Takrady area. Volta region, 2 cases in Ho. Ashanti has recorded 39, and that is quite high. 39 out of the 66 are from Ashanti. Obuasi, 3. Oforikrom, 9. Bekwai, 3. Ekrimwa Kwamoma, 10. Old Tafo, 4. Asokore Mampon, 10. So when you see something like this, it clearly shows, or it clearly should quickly move to Forikrom, which has recorded 9 new cases. Ekrimwa Kwamoma, 10 new cases, and then Asokore Mampon, 10. It's very important. It should be done quickly. Before they were at 1,010 cases, now they are at 1,049. Upper East hasn't recorded a new figure. Northern region has recorded 2 more, both in the Tamale metropolis, and then the new kid on the blog is Savannah. Savannah region has recorded its first case, and that is from the Salaga area of East Gonja. Details of this person is still unknown. All we know is that this person didn't travel outside the country, and authorities have not told us whether the person moved from any of the infected regions, or we don't know. So this is just one case, and we hope that contact tracing has started so that we quickly identify contacts and possibly quarantine them and ensure that it is contained in that part of the country. So if you look at it, the last figure, the last 24 hours, we've just recorded 66 cases. The day before, we recorded 131. The day before that one, we had 215. Before, 168. And then 78 thereabout. I was saying yesterday that, again, but basically around the same range. So we hope that this 66, it has reduced almost by half. Yesterday we had 131. Today we have 66. So we hope that this 66 will also become the new low, so we can see a bit of flattening along that line. And if that happens, then that gives us some hope. Already our death rate is very good. I mean, though 32 people have lost their lives, very unfortunate, and one even is one too many if you knew that person or that person was a relative. But given what you've seen, across the globe, 32 per 6,683 cases doesn't look bad at all, and almost 2,000 people recovering is quite some good news, approaching the 1/3 of it. And I think that is quite some good news, and I believe these figures, as we have them, will offer some good basis for decision makers to take decisions, because it appears the way is becoming clearer as we proceed.
Right, so talking about the way becoming clearer as we proceed, next week, that is 31st May, the ban on social gathering is going to expire, what is going to happen? Are we going to have the president extend it, or are we going to be easing our restrictions? Well, we wait to see. But Eben, what do you think, looking at how things are going, all these protocols that we are observing, looking at how we are recording figures, the figures coming in today are a bit better, than yesterday. What will likely happen? What do you think?
Personally, I think that observing the posture of government, for instance, at the last press conference, if you listen to the things that the Information Minister Kojo Oppong said, it tends to suggest that indeed certain decisions will be taken, certain new decisions that will give more relief to people will be taken. I mean, he talks about the fact that government is engaging the various stakeholders in the education sector, engaging businesses, industries. All that seems to suggest that we are nearing something, possibly. So I see an easing, obviously, and I think that it is not peculiar to Ghana. If you look at what is happening globally, everybody is working towards easing, because the point is that the world must move on. The reality is that it is here, it is not going on, and I think that the world is generally accepting that reality, that we can treat it, have the measures that we have, but open up for the economy and all that to move. So I think, also based on the number, unfortunately, it's not as if our case, we are seeing a decline. I mean, of course, the infection rate may not be as bad as before, but of course, we are getting more cases. Now you have over 6,000 cases. So if you look at just the numbers going up, you may actually decide to keep the measures as we have. But then there's more to that than just the numbers. I mean, if you may just see an increase, but then infection rate or transmission rate is not as bad, then we can take certain decisions and ease up things. Because as we speak, we know the airports are still closed to passenger services, and we know how much of an impact that is on the economy generally and on people. We know that hotels, restaurants, drinking spots are not operating as they should. We know churches are still going through a certain process. And don't forget, about 2-3 weeks ago, the church leaders met the president, and they presented a proposal of how they intend to enforce the safety protocols if the president decides to lift the ban. And I think that by now, government may have studied that, not just trusting them on their words, but they may have studied and also are putting some measures in place so that we ensure that there will be some level of enforcement when eventually that ban on public gathering is lifted. So personally, from how things are going, from government's own words and all that, I think I see a certain level of lifting. Just that what I'll be expecting is that everything is not going to happen at a go. For instance, if we are going to open schools, I have a feeling we'll do it in phases. For instance, maybe you are going to say final year students of the university or SHS should be allowed to go to school. Then maybe at a point we'll allow all others to come. You will not want to open for primary or kindergarten kids. So I think that there has to be a certain level of caution, and everything has to be done in a certain phases. I don't know about the airport, but the airport, if it has to be open, it has to be open, and probably still ensure, because we know that domestic flights are running. They were allowed about a week or two ago, but even that, they have reduced their numbers, and they are doing a lot of all the measures that they need to put in place. So that's the reality on us now. Things have to move. Certain decisions have to be taken. It's a risk for everybody, but then sometimes all you got to do is to take a risk, and that's it.
Right, so do you get a sense that we are easing our restrictions? Probably at the end of next month, next week, we are going to have the ban on public gathering lifted.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I'm more fortified in that thought that come Sunday, which is 31st, when I guess the president will speak again. I don't know whether he'll speak on the Saturday or the Sunday, I'm not sure. But he will speak.
He speak on Sunday.
Yeah, okay, so Sunday. So he will speak on the Sunday and perhaps provide some relief for a lot of people. So he today, when he was speaking at the Eid al-Fitr celebration, the virtual celebration, he sounded like the restrictions will have to be lifted at all costs. He sounded that way. And he made that point based on a number of factors. Number one, he said that if we've tested enough, we've tested a lot of people have been tested. Also, he made a point that our death rate, is being very low. And he also said so in a manner not to suggest that the people who have died were not important, very important. But when you look at the number of cases Ghana has recorded and the number of deaths that we have recorded as well, it appears that we are doing very well on that front. So 32 people have died, and per the calculation, he said it means that 1 out of 1 million people is died. That is quite some good statistics, 1 out of 1 million, and he brought that to 0.0001%. That is 1 per million. And if you are a decision maker, given the fact that this pandemic has slowed down, economic growth has slowed down almost everything. Schools have closed, churches have closed, small businesses have closed, etc. The weight of the economy is on your shoulders. And you don't want to be locked down in this for a long time because the risks are there, but the ultimate end of the risk is the death, and the death figures are low. And it has also become a bit clearer that we are getting to understand the disease. I can't say we've understood it fully because the world is still getting to understand it, but we appear to have had some understanding of what the disease is and how to play around it, what to do to boost our immune systems, etc. So based on these analysis, he sounded like he will lift or ease some of the restrictions, if not all, so that we can get back to our lives, if not fully, things can get moving. He also said that by the end of this week, maybe today or tomorrow, I don't know, will conclude his stakeholder engagements with various interested parties, and that will give him a clearer, picture, so he can also provide the nation clearer guidelines on how to proceed. So, for example, schools will have to reopen, maybe churches will have to open, small companies or institutions will have to open. But the how now is what we don't know.
Yeah.
So now we know the what. We know that they have to open. But I guess those guidelines he means are the how. So maybe he will say SHS students, Form 3s, the examination class should reopen. BEC candidates should reopen. Maybe final year university people should reopen. We don't know. But that is the how we are expecting to hear from him. And he has said that the stakeholder engagements are giving him an idea of how the restrictions should be eased. So we can look forward to brighter times, unless, of course, something drastic happens, which I doubt. So given that things are moving the way they are, I'm very surprised. I'm very confident that the restrictions will be eased.
Right, so I'm equally very interested in knowing the how, because we know that the nation must move forward, but how is very important. So let me share some articles with you on certain countries that have eased restrictions and what the outcomes have been. We probably might take lessons from that. So we have something from, churches in Texas and Georgia closed indefinitely after many test positive for virus following long-awaited reopening. So we have 2 churches have been forced to indefinitely suspend service after many congregants and leaders tested positive for COVID-19 following the reopening. So following the reopening, Washington Post reports, so Holy Ghost Catholic Church in Houston and Katosa Baptist Tabernacle in Ringgold are closed once again. So since the 2 priests and 3 members of the church's Redemptorist religious community have since tested positive for COVID-19, the church released in a statement on May 13, Holy Ghost Church priest Donald Kirchner, 79, passed away from unknown causes. On May 18, it was announced all masses at Holy Ghost Church are cancelled until further notice. So that is that. Now, let's check something on BBC. Coronavirus, over 40 COVID-19 cases traced to church service in Germany. So we have more than 40 churchgoers who attended a service after lockdown was eased in Germany earlier this month have contracted coronavirus. Officials say the service was held on 10th May at a Baptist church in Frankfurt. Church officials say they followed social distancing rules and disinfected the building ahead of the service. Each of Germany's 16 states determines its own lockdown exit plans. Hesse, where Frankfurt located, relaxed restrictions on worship on 1st May. So these are some of the issues. So we have churches reopening and people going to church and coming back with coronavirus. And so if we are easing restrictions, what do we really have to look out for, and what lessons do we take from these issues?
Well, interesting. I don't know what measures these churches in Texas and Georgia had in place. I don't know how.
So they stated that they observed social distancing and they also disinfected the church before the services began. But this is it.
Yes, but the Texas one, so from the story, it appeared the people came to church, of course, with the disease. That makes it a bit tricky. If the people have the disease already and they are coming to church or they are coming to crowded places, that makes it tricky, because you certainly do not have to go to crowded places. And if you have the disease and a number of you, then that makes it very difficult. So, for example, in Korea, we have the famous Patient 31. One of the spiritual churches, very popular in Korea. We had a patient who had contracted the disease, perhaps didn't know, and was in church. And the way I understand that particular church services is run, I mean, it's said that people are always close together, they visit each other, etc. And this Patient 31 happened to infect a lot of people in the church. After that, he went to a party in one of the hospitals nearby, transmitted or infected the people also in those areas. Whether church or whatever it is, once there are people there, it makes it a bit difficult, it makes it a bit tricky. But I want to take some solace in the proposal the Council of Churches also have made to the president. Of course, many have said that these are not things they can easily follow. But I think the suggestion really should be that the social distancing protocol should be strictly adhered to. I don't know how many of the churches can do that, but if we want to reopen churches, which is important in my view, we have to ensure that the social distancing protocols are adhered to. If you are using the microphone, when you finish using the microphone, they put a foam around it. You change it because people speak into it, and we have droplets, getting into it. You don't give the microphone to somebody else until the microphone is sanitized or disinfected. The pastor's microphone should be his microphone. He comes with it, preaches with it, goes to sit back with it. That kind of thing should happen. When people are singing, they should not be gathered or huddled together too much. There should be enough spacing and things like that. Laying on of hands, I don't know how that is going to work in this new system. Will you want to lay hands on people? Will you want to? I don't know how that is going to work. So I believe all these are somehow captured in the document that the churches have submitted. But it is a very difficult call for anybody in leadership. In fact, Trump, was it yesterday or a few days ago, said the churches were going to open because other places have been opened and Americans love their churches, so they will go to church. I don't think that is very different from what will happen in Ghana. I will be surprised if the church the president will want to reopen churches. But my suggestion is that we should have a lot more services. So, for example, if you run one service, we can have 2 or 3 more services so that a lot more people can be spaced out. When you go to church, you ensure that the hugging and the shaking, etc., is drastically reduced. Hand sanitizers, hand washing places, etc., should be fixed at various places, so that people can wash their hands. People must wear masks to church. Given that it's a church, you can't drive people away. So I advise that the churches should have a lot of face masks, so that if somebody comes to the church and doesn't have it, you don't turn the person away. You give the person one. But you encourage the people to come with face masks. When they come with face masks, they wash their hands, they hand sanitize before they get into the church. So the rate of transmission or the risk of transmission will be minimized, So that's what I think about the church. I don't think the president will make this announcement about easing the restrictions and leave out the churches. I don't think so. For many reasons. Ghanaians are church-loving people. We are in an election year. You don't want to say something that will make a section of the public unhappy. And you can imagine how it will be twisted if the churches are left closed and other places like drinking spots, pubs, etc. are open. there's a lot that could be said there. So my thinking is that yes, if you are easing the restrictions, ease it, but let's be sure about the monitoring. Let's be sure about what we will do post easing restrictions. We shouldn't, let down our guard. We should monitor and ensure the right thing is done. The other little problem I have is that in the case of the churches, we don't have a body that can force them to do what is right, apart from the state. In other institutions, like maybe the schools, for example, you have GES sitting at the top. Maybe now we have the Ministry of Religious Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs. Let's see what they can do. But that is the only issue I have with the churches, because they don't seem to have a regulator or one body sitting above them with a cane or with a whip to ensure they do what is right. But given that it's a place of conscience and it's a place of goodness, I'm thinking that the right thing will be done.
Eben, so churches are closed, schools are closed, a whole lot of other institutions are closed, the nightclubs, the pubs, and all these areas are closed. Just the little, people out there, all these people are no longer problems because they are not in operation. But enforcing the safety protocols, even in a market and with individuals, have really proven to be a challenge. If we are going to have churches open, we are going to have schools open, how are we going to get this done? Because already it has proven to be a very difficult situation.
The how is definitely difficult. And I have always said that you never get 100% compliance in anything. If you did that, I don't know. It's not possible. You won't get 100% compliance to everything. So, for instance, today there was a house in my neighborhood which had a number of Muslims who lived there, and they couldn't go to the mosque, obviously, because of the ban. And today was the end of the Eid al-Fitr, so they had to celebrate, and normally they have to end it with some prayer. They couldn't do a lot of collective prayers because of that. But what they did today, when I watched from my window, the Muslims in the community gathered in one house. It's a compound house. So they gathered and they were together. And they were doing the prayers to end the fasting. And that actually looked like a mosque. Because I didn't see any difference. I only saw about one person wearing a mask. But there were about 30 people, and they were gathered in a compound house praying. So the only difference is that they are not in the traditional mosque, but they have gathered in a house,
which makes it a mosque,
which still makes it like a mosque at that moment, and they were doing their prayer. I loved the effort and the unity of purpose that they had to stick together and still do what they had to do. But on the other side, I was worried about the protocols they had defined. So that's why I said that you can't have the 100% compliance. For instance, when you move through the communities, when you move through, let's say, Accra on the streets with an Okada who has a pillion rider, you will be easily found and arrested by a police officer. But there are Okada riders operating in communities. So inside the communities, aside the taxis, there are Okada riders. I've seen some this weekend. And they were moving with the pillion riders. The riders were still carrying the pillion riders. So the enforcement still becomes, you will never get 100% because, of course, if it's about policing, how many police officers do you have?
We may not get it 100%.
So we just have to work to get it to a certain level. Then you know that, okay, we've been able to manage it to this level. And so, because, for instance, I'm happy about the trotros. And till now, when you pick the trotro, you find that they are observing the social distancing. They are not doing overloading. But even those are the ones I'm seeing in the cities. Elsewhere, in certain villages where one car goes and another doesn't go till the next 5 hours, you don't know what is happening there. So that's why I say that you won't have it. It can't be a foolproof system. It's not possible. But we can just do our best and know that and trust and be confident that we have done our best to minimize the problems. Today, I was just reading on CNN. There's a beach in Florida. They allow the people to go to the beach, and now the police is worried because they said the crowd that turned up at the beach is not normal. It's too much, and they are worried. So there's a challenge everywhere for everyone. So we just have to do the little we can and know that we've done our best so that we minimize the impact. But the point is that as for the opening, it's going to happen. That's the reality. And you see, the thing about it is that, so like the example you gave in with the churches in Texas, it gives Ghana an opportunity to know how we are going to implement ours. You see, when somebody takes the risk, it's two things. They either Bible, it becomes a guide for you.
Exactly.
So if they have a challenge with what they did, it has become a guide for us on how we are going to do ours. Are we going to put some numbers in place and say, okay, churches that have 500 people, you are not going to do one service. You are going to reduce the numbers based on your church structure. So you are going to do, let's say, 3 or 4 services. So I think that there has to be deliberate planning going down there. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble.
Right. You know, Salam, talking about deliberate planning going on, we are just about, 7 days to the end of the month, 31st, and we still haven't seen how if restrictions are going to be eased, what is going to happen. Now, I have visited a number of churches, and what I realized was most of the churches have glasses all around, and so they use air conditioners. And we know that it is very important for ventilation in this period. So if these churches have glasses all around, are they going to be using their air conditioners? What is going to happen to them? Especially also because we've ahead, or most of the time, we observe that when the president comes out with a certain directive, it takes a day or 2, sometimes almost a week before implementation is done. And so just nearing the end of the ban, and nothing really is out there for people to know what is going to happen. If we are going to ease restrictions, what is what role are we supposed to be taking? We don't know all that. And so how is it going to be done?
It goes back to the how. Very interesting observation you made. So the president will give a directive. He may say that the restrictions have been eased and churches may go back to open for services. But he may do it a number of ways. For example, he could say, okay, so effective that day, churches could go back to normal service, holding normal services, which means the following day, churches could start congregating.
Exactly.
He could also say that the restrictions have been eased effective 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So if you haven't prepared, use the 2 weeks to prepare. It makes sense. It also gives people more time. It pushes the congregation or the gathering back 2 weeks more. So even though the restrictions have been eased, you can't go to church because it's been eased into the future or in the future. 2 more weeks. So that the churches to talk about with those with glasses, etc. I don't know how they're going to do that because the engineering of their building will not allow them to put up the ACs, that kind of thing. But those which can, I would advise that they will open the windows. If they can even use fans or standing fans, maybe the places haven't been designed for fans. But if they can get standing fans, that the number of congregants will reduce for deliberate reasons. In cold conditions. So that is a good observation, and I think that is what we should be doing. But again, I'll not be surprised if the president says the restrictions have been eased, churches can go back to open for services or can go back to services effective maybe 18th June. I would not be surprised that. So if he says that, the church community who are not happy with the restrictions will be relieved because they see the end in sight. So, they would have hailed the president whilst we keep doing what we expect to be done to ease the restrictions. We have 7 more days to go. Whether we have seen enough in terms of adherence or obedience to the protocols, etc., is another matter. My observation really is that people are getting complacent. People are getting used to the situation. So they think that, what can come, which is very dangerous, a very dangerous mentality to have. So you go to places, they don't really compel you or force you to wash your hands. You can get your way around, you can move. The sanitizers at places have run out. Some of the tissues at some of the Veronica buckets joints have run out and they've not bothered to even replace them, etc. People think these are extra costs or what can happen should happen.
Sometimes containers of the liquid soap themselves are very dirty.
So we need a renewal of the mindset, we need a reminder that we need to keep doing these things for a while. The figures today, 66, I hope it is not just a one-off. I hope it continues. If we begin seeing things like that, then that will be great. The areas which have more than 10 cases, let's quickly go to those areas, contact trace quickly. That that is the only way we can do this. I also hope that in the next few days we will see an increase in our recoveries.
Yeah.
We saw about 20 recoveries today, but we saw 66 new infections, which means that the infections and there are more infections and more people recovering. But we need to actually be seeing more recoveries at this time than infections. If we want to say that we are really cruising, we are not really cruising yet. Though the rate of infection, you may say, is flattening or is reducing, because the cumulative figures certainly will go up. But out of the cumulative figures, a lot have recovered. A few have died. So the active coronavirus population is not as much as the cumulative. That's obvious. So yes, so that is what I expect to see, that there will be a reinforcement of the messages. I don't know if new sanctions will be announced for places or people who flouted. In Spain, for example, we know that if you are caught without the face mask, you are fined. So now it doesn't really become a choice. You have to wear it. You don't want to pay 50 euros or $50, or I'm not sure. That is how they are doing it. So by doing so, a lot more people will wear it. And again, let me also say that the law enforcement people, if somebody is in his car, and alone especially, and even with the glasses rule, the person doesn't need to wear a mask.
No.
It doesn't make sense to wear a mask, because you're alone in the car. Yeah. I mean, there's nobody there. You are driving. You don't have to wear a mask. And
inside your car is not a public place.
Indeed. So it's just like saying that wear a mask when you're home. Because you're in your car. It's your private space. Wearing the mask for extended periods may also have its sides.
It's true.
If you don't take care, you may get suffocated. We've seen people use very hard materials like khaki, etc., for the nose mask. It is not appropriate. So if you have to wear the mask for extended periods, more than 2 hours, then you really have to think or rethink whether you indeed need to be at that place or not. And you see, the wearing the mask and doing the other things only reduces the risk. They only reduce the risk. They don't actually stop you from getting it. The best way is to stay home or stay out of where people are. That is the best way. But in the absence of that, we can use these measures to reduce the risk. And again, we need authorities to enforce certain things. The work culture, as I said yesterday, must change. That will go a long way to help us.
Right, so thinking of easing restrictions, what should be on our priority list? Schools or institutions like the nightclubs and stuff? Eben, what do you think? Should it be schools?
Well, schools. I read an article where somebody was trying to say that if your child stays home for a year more without going to school, he will not die. But if you
but let's look at other things, the economic impact on parents.
The schools, the challenge especially is for the private sector in terms of the economic aspect, because government running schools doesn't necessarily bring money. That's a fact. Yeah. JHS public sector doesn't bring money to government. SHS public sector doesn't bring money to government. Universities bring in something small to the government, but so the bigger conversation is those within the private school sector. Last time we heard about the number of people who are losing their jobs already in that space. So then that's, even with the school, that space becomes a challenge. But also even with the public schools, the challenge is that, don't forget that even as the teachers are home, government is supposed to be paying them. And that's a difficult situation, because it means people are home and not working, but they are being paid salaries. Of course, through no fault of theirs, but then that becomes a loss to the state. So that's also another challenge. The church economy, we have conversations about taxing the churches. Of course, the churches pay taxes for other non-religious activities. When the churches who have schools and stuff, they pay taxes normally. But of course, they don't pay tithes on offerings and tithes and what have you. So, but still, there's a church economy. Don't forget that the churches even have schools also they run. They have people they support and all that. For me, as for the opening, I think where we are losing so much is the airport.
Okay, but for the airport, nothing can be done right
which
now.
is linked to the hotels, because the hotels, the restaurants, and
tourism in general.
Tourism in general, there's a huge cost to tourism, and so that's also where it's really difficult to choose what over what. I don't think I'll be able to choose.
Right, Salom, let's look at the schools. You know, most of the time when we are discussing the schools, we look at, so the teachers are home, school owners are home, but let's look at the children who are home, those who do not have access to data to be doing online schools and all. Let's look at truancy. So children in certain villages, what are they doing right now? Let's look at parents. How are parents also dealing with these things? Some parents have to go to work, their children at home. Not everybody can also afford to get nannies and, you know, house help and all. Let's look at this side of it, especially the children. What are they doing?
Very interesting. I mean, a lot of the children, those who have parents going to work, obviously they should be loitering about, which is not good. So the situation puts a lot of pressure on parents, because some jobs have, some workplaces have reopened or are working.
Yeah.
So parents have to go to work. There was some story I heard about a parent who could not leave the children at home. The workplace wrote to her for the way forward. Are you coming to work or not? I said, no, I can't leave my kids at home.
Yeah.
But the person needs the income from the work as well. And the person is torn between two things: the means of livelihood and the children. That's a very difficult choice to make. So the parents are really suffering too. You know, myself, I'm a parent. You know, you may talk about online studies, etc. I have a little girl. There was this Zoom thing the school was doing. I was helping her do it. She just knows she wants to go to where the friends were, because she saw on the screen that the friends were in a house or something different. But because she's young, she's unable to know that everybody's in their house. So they say we are seeing them, also seeing you like that in your house. It doesn't take you more than 10 minutes to convince her that no, everybody's in their house. They are not gathered at one place. So just flow. You know, and it's a bit of a difficulty. Kids, their attention span is
very short.
Short. So it's not a joke. You know, it's made me appreciate
even the
teachers.
other costs
even
it
better.
brings.
The cost, etc. So the schools must reopen. The parents suffering, students at home loitering about, GSS students, SS students,
teenage pregnancies.
Those of them who have friends around, what would they be doing? They'll be loitering about, visiting friends, etc. And the risks involved in that, your guess is as good as mine. We don't want to live very bad as when we finally move on from coronavirus. So all these things must be done in such a way that we do not lose too much. If somebody, because of the restriction, the parent has to go to work, the kids are home, teenage years, go to visit friends, things happen, and they get pregnant, that is an indelible, mark on the person's life forever, which will be attributed to the consequences of coronavirus. The restrictions must be eased, but we should have a discussion about how to ease it so that nobody, like the dangers are not, worsened further. Parents, students, etc. Everybody needs to get a piece of it to ensure that we don't lose too much.
Right, so next week, 31st May, I mean, if the discussions going on is anything to go by, we may be looking at some of the bans being lifted. But as a people, how do we move on? Life after COVID restrictions.
Well, Freema, I think the fact that there's a certain level of admission globally that this disease, for now, is staying. So then everybody, no matter what you're doing, the fact that you've been given a certain level of freedom, you need to still have it at the back of your mind that the disease is not gone yet. So then I have to take a certain responsibility.
Because we lifted the lockdown and people felt like the COVID is gone.
The disease is gone, so that's why we need to reinforce the messages. We need to reinforce the education and all that. It's still important so that people know that it is still with us. So people have that awareness that it is here, it is not gone yet. A vaccine is a long-term solution. It hasn't been found yet. And the disease has not burnt out yet, like the SARS that burnt out in 2003 by itself, or the MERS that burnt out in 2014 or 2016, which I'm told occasionally emerges in some countries. So people have to have that awareness so that we are not complacent, because when the complacency sets in, that becomes a challenge. But of course, there will still be some sacrifices people will have to make, because I don't think that on 31st the president is going to say, okay, now the trotros that take 3 on a seat, you can now go back to 3. I don't think we are going to do that. So still people are going to be hurt. So everybody has to make a certain sacrifice. I mean, I met an Uber driver who was telling me that, okay, so he has some guys driving the Uber for him. So he's somehow tried to reduce the cost, all right, who drive taxis and trotros for him. So like how much you have to bring as sales. He has also reduced it because he knows that the number you pick, capacity has reduced. So he also has to reduce the sales for you. So everybody has to make a certain sacrifice at a point. And people have to have that sense of awareness. I think that's the sense of awareness that it is still here, but we are living our lives with caution. I think that's all we need to have.
Right, Salom, before you come in, let me quickly take some messages. So we have Wizia Hable from Suhum, and he says, as there are moves by some people to government to ease some of the restrictions, my suggestion is that government should increase the testing centers, example, every region, so that we could test more people. Fosti in Takwa says the government should demand from each church implementation plans being put in place to ensure the safety of their members before they are given a go ahead to start. And we have one, if we do the right things, we can tame COVID-19, just like Mauritius and Western Sahara, where there are no more active cases and no new cases for many days. Why the rush to lift restrictions? Why are we stopping testing when prevalence is increasing? God save us. And this comes with
testing
name.
Testing
is still ongoing. But Salom, you realize that gradually the conversation is moving from COVID-19 to NPP, NDC, to Electoral Commission, to Voters Register, and probably because we are nearing the elections. If the restrictions are going to be lifted, how should we lead our lives? Should we still be very worried about COVID-19? Should it still be on our priority list?
Yes, we should think about it, but the reality is that we will not think about it as we have thought about it in the last 2 months. Indeed, there was about 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown, where everything in the country was COVID-19. The focus was on COVID-19. So COVID-19 has really enjoyed some airtime and some attention. When the restrictions are eased, yes, once in a while we will talk about it, but not with the intensity with which we are talking about it now, or we've talked about it, which is really not a good thing. The government and the necessary or the relevant agencies must make it a point to keep that discussion a bit up there. It may not be the most topical thing because other things are happening. Election is coming, Electoral Commission is happening, NDC, NPP is happening. A lot more things are happening. And I wasn't surprised when, is it last week and last 2 weeks, I monitored the weekend programs and there was very little said about COVID-19. In fact, on some of them, COVID-19 didn't feature at all. So I said, oh, okay, it means we are making a natural transition to some other things. People may be tired with the COVID-19 news, though it may still be there. So when the restrictions are eased, it gives people the opportunity to think that all is well. That is why the message must be reinforced that we are easing it, not because all is well, but because other things must also happen. You know, Electoral Commission will do its work, NDC and MPP will get to work. Indeed, the government has said that it has no intention of extending its stay in power by not holding elections. So elections will happen. South Korea held elections. It was held well. In fact, the turnout was one of the best because they put in place some structures. I hope that Electoral Commission is thinking about that and not just thinking about its own people, so that the PPEs they are procuring are not just for their people. They must ensure that the over 17, 18 million people they hope to register in this short space of time are adequately protected. It is important, adequately protected, so that people won't, be disenfranchised because they will say they did not want to go to the polling centers to register because of COVID-19. So I think, COVID-19 news will gradually, be moved into the second, third tier of the news if you look at it. But what must we be doing? I expect that the situation we had in Tema, where the fish processing company had about 1,300 people working at the place, and over 600 or 700 of them getting infected, ballooning our figures. will not happen again, or similar things are not happening. The factories inspectorate or the municipal and district assemblies must get to work. Every municipal assembly must have a fair sense of where crowding is in their jurisdictions, so that if you know there's crowding in this particular part of my jurisdiction, it could be for economic reasons, it could be for social gatherings, etc., you deploy officers to be checking on those places to ensure that the people are not too crowded or are not overcrowded, and that they are, observing the protocols. Very, very important. So we don't leave the food processing or fish processing factory or company kind of thing to happen again. That would be very bad. The churches, the MMDAs, I think, are responsible for the churches somewhat. They must also ensure that by now they are dealing with the leadership of the churches to understand how they hope to begin or conduct services as we anticipate an easing of the restrictions. If they have not started doing this now, I'll be very surprised. They have to be proactive. They don't have to wait for the president to speak before they move into action. That is why sometimes we have a lag time. President speaks today, expecting something to happen immediately, and the thing happens 4, 5, 6 days later. They must be proactive. They must kind of understand what the thinking of the system is, begin to engage the relevant stakeholders, so that when the decision or the announcement finally comes, you just signal that those things we've discussed already should kick in. Education directories, when schools open finally, we need to ensure that monitoring is key. We need to see education inspectors moving from place to place every day, ensuring that the right thing is done. Schools and churches and all those places, clusters, and where we have a lot of people are places where the thing can happen or it can spread. GPRTU, the Ministry of Transport, should ensure that they're also kept in check and they do the right thing. That is the only way we can survive this.
Right. Eben, you want to add something quickly?
Yeah, finally, I think that we've had several times to criticize the government in its handling of this situation, but admittedly, I think that we've done a good job generally, and we need to appreciate the efforts the government has put in. I mean, there was a story today about Ghana's health minister being elected to serve on the executive board of the World Health Organization at this point in time. And that's, for me, is an endorsement of Ghana's efforts in this fight globally and even within Africa, that we've done a good job. And so we should keep, when they go wrong, we'll put them in check, but they are doing a good job, but we need to appreciate them. And also, I think I've seen a trend where I've spoken to some health workers who talk about being given cloth mask constantly in the hospitals, and it's a danger because the cloth mask is not good for somebody, for example, who is going to deliver a baby in a hospital space. It's dangerous because it cannot protect you, and they need surgical mask. And I think that we need to check that and make more provision for the health workers, because a number of them are getting infected and is worrying.
All right, thank you very much, Eben. Thank you very much, Salom, and thank you also for sending us your messages and watching and listening to us. Thank you. This has been our special coverage on COVID-19. My name is Premier Dunyame. See you again tomorrow. Stay safe.